What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be talking about what really changed from the beta build of the game to launch for Vanguard. Now, several days ago, before the game actually launched, Sledgehammer released a blog post talking about the changes that they made from beta to launch, at least the main changes that they made. However, that was just a blog post. That was all just looking at things on paper. In today's video, I'm actually going to be putting these things to the test, as well as bringing in a bunch of other things that weren't mentioned in that blog post to let you guys know exactly what changed and how much the game improved from the beta. And diving right into it, let's start it off with visibility, because this is one of the huge areas that they really worked on from beta till launch. The first aspect of visibility that they massively improved is visibility while firing your weapon. In the beta, visibility while firing your gun was brutal. In the first weekend, there was a crazy distortion effect, and then throughout the entire beta, there was just too much muzzle flash and, more importantly, muzzle smoke. This muzzle smoke was so pronounced it was like we were firing black powder cartridges or something out of our guns. And the most pronounced example that we saw was with the LMGs, so let's have a look at a before and after comparison here. This is what the beta looked like from the first weekend with the MG42, and you can see here everything's blurry, there's so much smoke going on, you can't track a target even at like medium range with this. You're going to lose that target in your sight very easily. Whereas now, with the full build of the game, also using the same gun, I even set myself up in the same area so the lighting and everything is all controlled. The visibility is completely different and massively improved in this area, and this has not been a complaint of mine so far while playing the full build of the game. They straight up fixed visibility while firing your gun, which is great to see. Next up for visibility, they nerfed the sun, so they just cut down on that crazy glare that you get out of the sun, and as you can see now, it's no problem at all. Like, obviously the sun is still up there, it's fairly bright, but it's not going to be blinding you if you're looking in the general direction. Another thing I really noticed on multiple maps actually, but a great example of this is once again on Gavutu here. In the beta, if you were outside of the boat looking in, it was really difficult to see what was going on, and there was a weird transition period where it's like your eyes had to adjust as you came from outside inside, and you could be like basically blinded as you came into this boat. There's also a lot of haze in there. They just eliminated that. It's perfectly clear now looking from the outside in or inside out. Both sides are going to be seeing each other equally as well, and that's how it should be in a multiplayer environment. It might not look as realistic, but it is far more competitive to have it the way that they've got it balanced now, and this is great to see. Going off of that, it really seems like they just cut down on the general haziness of the maps, and this is also really helpful, especially if you're looking at somebody at longer ranges. They're going to be a lot more clear now in the full build of the game than they were in the beta. So those are the general visibility improvements that I've personally noticed from the beta. The game definitely looks much better and more polished in the full build of the game. Now let's talk about audio. The audio in the beta build was terrible. It was bugged, something was wrong with it. It sounded like you were underwater, it was super muffled, it was just terrible. Like you couldn't hear an enemy firing a gun 10 feet from you. You couldn't hear what direction that gunfire was coming from. It was that bad. And on top of that, there was essentially zero footstep audio in the beta. With the full build of the game, they just fixed this. It sounds like a normal Call of Duty game now. If somebody fires a gun, you can pretty easily pinpoint the direction and even the distance that they are away from you, or general distance. So that part's great to see. They just straight up fixed the audio in that area. Now, when it comes to footsteps, this is something I'm going to be doing a dedicated video on within the next couple days, talking about Ninja and Dead Silence and general footstep audio. So I'm not going to dive into too much detail here, but what I wanted to show you guys is there is some footstep audio, but unless the enemy is tack sprinting, it's unlikely you're going to be hearing them in the full build of the game. So they kept the base footstep audio quite quiet, and I suspect this may change over time because it is very, very quiet for default footstep audio. But I'll just play a clip here so you can have a listen in a controlled environment to see just how quiet these footsteps are. So yeah, there you have it. Very faint footstep audio in the current build of the game, so you absolutely can't rely on footsteps as your primary source of awareness. And like I said, I will be diving into much more detail with this in a dedicated video, so make sure you subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already so you don't miss that one. So those are the audio fixes. The game definitely sounds significantly better. Now let's just move on to a bunch of miscellaneous changes that they made. First up, we've got sprint out times. The sprint out times have been sped up on a bunch of the guns. It wasn't quite across the board. Like most of the assault rifles and SMGs, they're the same as they were in the beta, and that's fine because they were actually balanced just fine in the beta in my opinion. However, it's really the outliers that they targeted, like the M1 Garand. That had a terribly slow sprint out time. I think it was actually the slowest sprint out time I have ever seen on a weapon in Call of Duty. And they have now brought that in line with where it should be for a marksman rifle, at least. I mean, the M1 Garand isn't going to have a super fast sprint out time now, but it's no longer so painfully slow that it makes the gun unusable. It's just a little bit on the slow side. Same thing goes with the LMGs and the sniper rifles. Those have all been improved pretty significantly when it comes to sprint out, so they can actually compete with assault rifles and SMGs to some degree. Now, on top of this, they also fixed the menus for sprint out times, and I'm happy to say they actually got the sprint out times right in the in-game menus. As far as I can tell, I haven't tested every single gun, but I did test a handful of them, and all of them were perfectly accurate, at least for your standard sprint out time. They don't state your tactical sprint out time in those menus, but the sprint out times that they do share seem to line up perfectly with your standard sprint out times. Now, additionally, for general weapon adjustments that they've made, across the board for every single gun, as far as I can tell, they have improved the aim down sight movement speed by 10 to 20%. This is a very noticeable boost, so you're able to strafe in gunfights a lot more effectively now. And this is another great improvement that they made, in my opinion. You no longer feel like you're locked in place the moment you aim down sight. Now, on top of this, one huge thing that I didn't like in the beta build of the game was the frangible ammo type. In the beta, this massively increased the amount of flinch that you would deal to enemy players, so they would flinch a lot more when you shot them if you're using that ammo type. And that was the primary issue that I had with this. Also, the fact that it had no trade-off for that, so there was no downside to using frangible. In the full build of the game, they just completely removed that flinch effect. So as far as I know now, there is no way for you to have any control over the flinch that your enemy is experiencing, and that's how it should be, in my opinion. You should have control over your own flinch. It should depend on the weapon that's in your hand and the attachments and the perks that you are using, not the attachments and perks and weapons that the enemy players are using. So I'm really happy to see that particular change. Also, a minor complaint I had in the beta was the fact that you couldn't call in multiple spy planes at the same time on your team. So if somebody already called a spy plane in, you couldn't call yours in until theirs was up. And with this, they just went back to the old school system where you can call in multiple spy planes at the same time. The more you call in, the higher the frequency will be with the sweeps on the minimap. And if your team calls 3 spy planes in at the same time, you will get an advanced UAV for as long as all 3 of those spy planes are in the air. So that's another excellent change that wasn't mentioned in the patch notes. Moving on to the next thing, I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware of this by now, but they added an FOV slider to console on every single platform. So it doesn't matter if you're on an older generation of console or one of the new generation consoles, everybody's got access to the FOV slider. And then I also just wanted to make a quick note about suppression in the game. This is another one of those things where I will have a dedicated video coming in the next couple days, so I'm not going to dive into too much detail, but I wanted to point something out with suppression that we didn't know in the beta and we now know at launch, or maybe this did change for launch. Suppression doesn't actually work for near misses. As far as I can tell, you have to actually hit your target in order for any sort of suppression effect to take place. So it's kind of strange that they're even calling it suppression, because suppression is usually shooting near your target will cause some kind of an effect. That's not the case at all. This is more so like the frangible disabling sort of a weapon perk that we saw in Modern Warfare. It's kind of like that, but it applies anywhere in the body, and it doesn't harm you as significantly as that. So that big concern that I had from the beta build of the game being suppression, it's not even remotely close to as bad as I thought it was going to be. I still don't like the idea of it, but we'll dive into more detail when we get into the dedicated suppression video. And with that, those are all of the main changes that really stood out to me playing the full build of the game compared to the beta. They have made huge improvements to this. The game feels so much more polished, and it really felt like the beta was a beta, not just a demo like everybody claims that it is. It seems like they really did learn a ton of lessons from the beta, and they brought them into the full build of the game, and it really looks like they're listening to the community. Having said that, though, I just wanted to point out a small handful of things that I didn't like in the beta that did not change for the full build of the game, since I know a lot of people will be asking about these. The first one is the fact that there are no factions. It's still Team A versus Team B, and you can have teammates that look literally identical to enemy players. It's not like a major thing that completely destroys my experience in the game, but it is a minor annoyance that could have been avoided in my opinion. Additionally, a lot of people have been asking about the slide cancel tac sprint delay. So after you slide cancel in Vanguard in the beta, there was quite a bit more of a delay before you could get back into a full tac sprint compared to Modern Warfare or Warzone. And that appears to be exactly the same as in the beta. So they didn't adjust that at all. I think this is a deliberate design decision on their part. They want to cut down on people abusing the tac sprint slide cancel. So I don't anticipate any changes to this anytime soon. Additionally, one big thing that a lot of us were asking for, and I was hoping maybe we would see a change to, is the radar perk and the fact that we don't have a traditional minimap in the game where unsuppressed weapons will show up as a red dot on the radar. You don't get that unless you're using the radar perk. It seems like the overwhelming majority of the community that talks about Call of Duty, at least online, they really seem to want that traditional minimap just built in for everyone. So no radar perk necessary. Everybody should have access to that. And that didn't change from the beta. We still have to use the radar perk if you want to see enemies that are firing unsuppressed weapons on the minimap, which is a little bit annoying to me because this just means that I'm running radar on literally every single class setup that I have. I will fully admit radar is a crutch perk for me, and I will be using it 100% of the time all the way throughout the year. There's no other tier 2 perk that comes even close to the power of that if you know how to read a minimap properly. And it's just one of those things where they could have avoided this crutch perk, but instead they just left it as is. Then to wrap all of this up, since a lot of people are asking, skill-based matchmaking and disbanding lobbies. We don't know for sure about skill-based matchmaking. It's going to take a couple weeks for things to settle in, and I will be doing a skill-based matchmaking study this year, but I suspect nothing has changed there based on my playtime with it so far. And also, lobbies are disbanding. So after a game, it's going to kick you out, and you have to search for a new one. And I just don't like that. It takes away so much of the heart and soul and the social experience and the rivalries that you build in game. It takes so much of that away, and I hate it, but as far as I'm aware, that's not even under Sledgehammer's control. That's an Activision decision, and it just really sucks to see that it's not going away anytime soon. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on what really changed from beta till launch. With the exception of those handful of things that I mentioned at the end of the video, the game has improved massively from the beta, and they did take care of nearly every serious gameplay complaint that I had with the beta. Now, of course, this is just my opinion. I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about the beta build of the game versus the launch build of Vanguard? Do you agree with me? Do you think they made some massive improvements here, or do you think they didn't do enough? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.